Hi, everybody. So I'm Dr. Lisa Koche, board certified functional medicine, integrative medicine. And today I want to talk to you about a topic that I've been speaking of for a really long time, which is getting this 10 minutes a day of early morning sun. And we all know kind of intuitively, it sounds like a good idea that we are beings that should be connected with the planet, and that not immediately going to our phones when we wake up is a better way of existence. But it turns out the science is coming around more and more, and it's really, really interesting. So what happens with the sun in general, and why you need to have it go into your eye, because I always tell patients, do not wear sunglasses because they will block this pathway, but don't stare at the sun either. So what happens is the light enters the eye, and we have in our eye rods and cones that help us delineate what we're seeing in color, and the eye is amazing. It's just amazing. But there's also these intrinsic photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, they're called, and they contain a photopigment called melanopsin. So the big mouthful of words, basically just know that there's a pigment in the eye that is sensitive to light. So when these cells go and kind of collect the light and it goes in and triggers the melanopsin, it goes through a path called the retinohypothalamic tract that goes to what's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So this part of the brain, you could just call it the SCN. And the SCN is where the money is in regards to this. So this suprachiasmatic nucleus is kind of like our timekeeper. And it needs signals from the planet. This is where some of the beauty of human and earth and the collaboration that comes in when we know we're meant to be partners with the planet. This is one of the spots where it's happening. So it's a circadian pacemaker, meaning 24-hour rhythms that happen with our nervous system, with our peripheral organs. They kind of get set. Like the pacemaker in the heart sets the rhythm, the pacemaker in this path in the brain that is coming through the eye, the pacemaker for the day, and what's meant to happen at different times is going through this SCN or suprachiasmatic nucleus. So what happens is when the SCN gets signaled, it tells the HPA axis, which is one that many of you may have heard of, hypothalamus pituitary axis. That's between the brain and your adrenals, that it's time to wake up. So it is connected to the cortisol awakening response. So many people are messed up in this path where their signal with the cortisol that's supposed to be high in the morning, and I don't know how many of you know about the proper cortisol response. So if you look at a 4-point saliva test, which is relatively easy for you guys to get, morning, noon, 3, and bedtime, it's a good idea to see what your cortisol response is doing. It's naturally supposed to be higher in the morning, kind of lower by lunchtime, and then by 3 in the afternoon, kind of even out, and by bedtime go down. And most people, or not most people, but at least a lot of people have this backwards curve, and we didn't fully understand why, and we're starting to understand more and more. But what happens with the backwards curve is you don't get that morning cortisol surge that gets you out of bed. You tend to just kind of stay flat, wake up feeling flat, and then you may peak later in the day and into the evening get more agitated and find it harder to go to sleep. So this backwards cortisol curve, the wired but tired, has a lot to do with the suprachiasmatic nucleus and the lack of signaling, or the disrupted signaling that people are living by now. So because what happens is when we get the light exposure, it suppresses our melatonin, and darkness allows the melatonin to go up at night, which helps us sleep. So the SCN also is in charge of serotonergic signaling, meaning that mood regulation. where serotonin is the most important mood hormone. If we have circadian phase alignment, meaning the proper surge of cortisol in the morning based on light and the proper suppression based on darkness, we have better sleep timing, sleep efficiency, and improved insulin sensitivity, reduced symptoms of seasonal depression especially, but cortisol, melatonin, insulin, leptin, ghrelin, hunger hormones, all these things seem to be tied into that suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is fascinating, you guys. So a lot of the insulin resistance that we've been wondering, where the heck is this coming from? Like, why is my blood sugar high? And I don't know about all of you, but I noticed when I started wearing a CGM, which is a continuous glucose monitor, it was pretty interesting because my morning sugar was high and I hadn't eaten a thing. And a lot of times by the time I got up and ate something, the sugar actually came down, which seemed like such a opposite response of what you would expect. So I've been trying to understand this. And all of us know people, including ourselves, that don't eat very much and still have been gaining weight or having that blood sugar in the 90s or the hundreds without an obvious cause. So this could be it, which is your insulin sensitivity is off because the circadian regulation that's involved with the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is sensitive to your light exposure, is disconnected and disjointed. So what I would say is the morning is the most important. So if you can get outside within 60 minutes of waking, even on cloudy days. So a lot of times people are like, well, it's too cloudy, I don't need to do it. It's too cold, and I get that it's harder when it's really cold out, but if you can still make it an effort just for 5 or 10 minutes to be outside without sunglasses. If you want to lean up on a tree or go for a walk, even better, pair it with walking, pair it with stretching. I'm all about, stacking habits and multitasking. But remember that morning sunlight is a good 10 to 100 times brighter than what you get with indoor lighting, which is also the wrong blend of wavelengths. So going back to ancient rhythms and just giving it a moment to understand and honor and respect the earth. We are meant to have our clocks set by the sun. We are meant to have our biology set in circadian ways, which again are deep. There's a lot of science here. There's a lot more where this came from. And I'll keep going deeper with you guys. I just want you to have a basic understanding that the rods and cones that help us see are just one thing in the eye. We've also got these other receptors that have a direct pathway to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, utilizing melanopsin and that pigment that helps absorb the sun. And then we can set our rhythm for the day. So especially, I've seen this a lot with patients of mine, if you have sleep issues, or if either you can't fall asleep or you fall asleep but then you're waking a lot, one of the first things to try is to really get your butt outside the second that you wake up. So ideally that's as close to sunrise as possible, because watching the sunrise even more powerful. But if whatever works for you within an hour of waking, to get outside without sunglasses and just honor your biology. Let the sun either go for a walk, listen to a podcast, breathe, lean up on a tree. I prefer a gratitude practice where you consciously have gratitude for the sun, the trees, nature, source, creator, God, whatever you want it to be. And you ask for anything that's not for your higher good to be transmuted and just to be cleared by nature, by the planet. The planet wants to help us. If you just do that intentional work for 5 or 10 minutes, it's going to help you reset those deeper and more understood circadian controlled rhythms that involve a lot of the hormones. And we keep trying to hammer hormones on the other side of it. And we'll talk more about leptin in the next video, but it's like we're trying to hammer insulin and glucose, and getting really scientific about it. And what if it's just that we're not supposed to stare at a screen and our lives have been hijacked by being indoors and we need to just go back to some basics. So morning light, it's free. If you want better sleep, balanced hormones, brighter mood, just start here, guys. I promise. That little act, 10 minutes of exposure combined with gratitude, and your life is going to start getting better immediately.